Good evening.
Good evening, Rabbi.
Thank you. Yosef, we did. Okay, so we'll do Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, we did Shulchan Aruch also. So we're going to the next chapter. Ish Mem Gimel. Well, it says here in the tour, Yasinan Pek Beso Pek Kama de Avodah Zarah. It says in the end of the Avodah Zarah, Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Lo yaskir Adam merachzo legoi, merchatzo לגוי, מפני שנקרא על שמו, וגוי זה עושה בו מלאכה בשבתות וימים טובים. So says the tour, don't rent out your bathhouse to the goy because it's called on your name. So people know that it belongs to a Jew. And this goy does labor on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So basically what he's telling you is that if the bathhouse belongs to him, don't rent it out to him to use it on Shabbat and Yom Tov, to operate it. So regarding this, says the two Bet Yosef, but Diak Gemara. So it deduces in the Gemara. Aval sadeu legoy mai share. So what about if you give your field to the goy? In the same manner, it's allowed. Mai tama arisa arisute ka'avid. Why is that? Because he's like a sharecropper, a person who works the field. He's just doing his job there as a sharecropper. So then he says you can say the same thing also about the bathhouse, that he's doing his job. Harisa, so Gemara answers, you know what? People don't usually do sharecropping when it comes to bathhouses. So what does he mean to say by that? When a Jew owns a bathhouse, he doesn't rent out the rights on Shabbat to a goy. It's not the common way of doing things like this. But when it comes to the land, it is the way to do it like that, sharecropping. So just to explain to you, right, what is sharecropping? Sharecropping means that he works the field, right, and he takes a certain percentage of the crops. So he's not getting a salary. Right? He's getting a percentage. That's what sharecropping is about. So when it comes to the bathhouse, usually it's not that way. So what does that mean? If a goy is operating the bathhouse, which belongs to the Jew, he's not usually taking a percentage, but rather he's, like as a laborer there. He's a worker. So since he's a worker, the profits are going to the Jew apparently, right? That's the way people think about it, So they misconstrue that, they think that it's being operated by the Jew on Shabbat. This is the problem. So when it comes to the bathhouse, it looks bad because it's not the way to sublet, the bathhouse to a goy to operate it. But when it comes to the field, the farm, whatever, there it is common, right, to do sharecropping, subletting, whatever you want to call it, right, to a goy. So this is the reason why it's not the same issue. So when it comes to the bathhouse, right, we don't allow this. The rabbis decreed not to do it. When it comes to the field, they did allow. Okay, great. So then he comes to explain, Klomar aval merchatz kivan telav l'risut avid. But he says when it comes to a bathhouse, since it's not really made for subletting, sharecropping, whatever you want to call it, amre shekol harevach leIsrael. So people are going to think, oh, all the profits are going to the Jew. Besachar et hagoy bechach, and he hired the goy, right, to work for him on Shabbat. וכך ליום, ונמצא הגוי עושה מלאכה בשליחותו של ישראל. So it turns out that the goy is getting a paid salary, a fixed salary, which is coming, from the Jew. Okay. So it goes on. ואף אגב דרבי שמעון בן אלעזר פליג חתם ארבע שמעון Ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon Pasco Tosfot. So it says, even though this rabbi there argues with this rabbi, no, so it's a machloket there between the two rabbis. Pasku Tosfot ve'Arosh, but the Tosfot and Rosh paskind halacha kirashbag, like the Rabban Shimon Gamliel. V'chen dat Arif, also the Rif says like that. Sham, besov pek kitvei, kol kitvei. So you see, right, the majority of the authorities here apparently, right, go like the first opinion, which we just described. V'chen pasak Rambam, the Rambam also goes like that. Pek vav. V'chen data samag, also samag. Okay, so you see, right, all the rabbis are pretty much on the same side here. The Samak, Truma, and all these rabbis, the Katab Ran, says the Ran, Umeha Shaminan, so we learn from this, the Chevan Sheish LeGoy Chelek Meperot HaSadeh, since the Goy has a portion in the fruits of the field, Afal Pi She'Yisrael Ne'ena Mimlechet HaShabbat, even though the Jew is taking benefit from the labor of Shabbat, Mutar, it's allowed. The Chevan de Kula Melacha Ramia Aleh, the goy, that since all the labor, right, is incumbent upon the goy to do, kika avid goy adata de nafshe. So then, when he's doing it, this labor, he's doing it for himself. Vehanat Israel mimela atya, and the benefit to the Jew comes automatically. Hilkach shara, therefore it's allowed. Because sheken shemutar leaskir sadeu legoy. All the more so, he says, you're allowed to rent out the field to the goy, because the goy will sublet it for a certain amount of money. Because in this manner, when the goy does this kind of an operation, he's doing it for himself, not for the Jew. Israel mitane kelal, lo mitane kelal, and the Jew is not really benefiting from it at all. V'chen dat Rambam, that's what the Rambam says. Also Perek Vav. V'chen dat Rosh, also the Rosh, בסוף פרק עבודה זרה, in the end of עבודה זרה, שהתיר להכשיר תנור מרחץ והזכירו רבנו בסמוך. So he allowed to rent out, right, oven or bathhouse, and the Torah mentions this later on a little bit. Okay, great. So what else we got here? So this was Aleph. Okay, there's a little bit more here. The Bet Yosef. Yeah. So let's read that. Continue on the Bet Yosef. So he says, brings the Ramban here, V'katav Ramban, Tanu yesh mistapakim bo. Oh, so now, right, we already spoke about the issue of the field and the bathhouse. And we said they're not the same thing. So now, question is about the oven, right? What about the oven? Is that which category does that fall into? Does it fall into the category of the bathhouse, or does it fall into the category of the field? So let's see inside what the Torah says about that. So it says the Torah like this. There is a doubt regarding this. So meaning what? We're not sure, as we said, right, which category it falls into. And in derech leachiro. So what does that mean? We're not sure if it's a derech, if it's the way to sublet it, kimo sadeh, like a field, the shara, and then therefore will be allowed. Or im domeh lemerchatz yasur. Or on the other hand, right, maybe it resembles the bathhouse and it's forbidden. Vehu ichriya leisur. So yeah, so the Ramban came out stringent with this. The dafka sadeh omrim ad arisut kaima. So it says only regarding a field we say that it's it's common to do sharecropping with the field. Aval tanur eno omed larisut. But when it comes to the oven, it doesn't usually get subletted. But you know kemerchat, so therefore it's like the same as the bathhouse. Apilu hiskiro leshana. Even if you rented it out for a year, asur, still forbidden. Uvrichaim nahagu eter. So he says, but what about mills, right? So there they were. The custom is to be lenient when it regarding a mill. So meaning what? When it comes to a mill, they do usually sublet it, right? It's common. Shomdim le'arisut. Rabbeinu Ahai. So this rabbi says, Zal katav im hiskiru shanaim shanim arbeh. So he says, what about if he rented it out, the the oven for many years, and then it became publicized. So what does that matter? Because now that since people know that it's being subletted by a goy, so then there's no issue of mait ein, of having suspicion there. Mutar. So he says there it's allowed. So he says that's the custom, to be lenient. Babel in Iraq. So he says the Rosh writes, ולפי זה נתברר ונתפרסם הדבר. So it says, according to what we just said now, if it's been publicized, בכל גבולנו, in all our, boundaries, whatever, right? שכל מי שיש לו מרחץ, that whoever has a bathhouse, or tanur, or he has a oven, אינו סוחר פועלים לעשות לו מלאכה. He doesn't hire workers to do labor, בהם, in them, ולוקח הוא הרווח של הרחיצה. So he takes the profits of the bathing, והאפייה, and the baking. אלא משכירו לאחד לשנה, rather what he does is he rents it out once a year, or לחודשים, or several months, בדבר ידוע, for a known rate. ושייתו לחוכר כל הרווח, and the sharecropper, whatever you want to call it, right, subletter, will take all the profits that will come to him. Hilkach mutar bekablanut. So therefore, you're allowed to do it with kablanut, right? So what is kablanut? Kablanut means contractor. If you're doing it as a contractor. She'en melechet akum nikret al shem Yisrael. So there, right, when you're a contractor, you're like independent, independent contractor. So therefore, people know that you're not doing it for the Jew, you're doing it for yourself. It's like you're running a business. אבל אם היה משכירו לימים, on the other hand, right, if he was renting it out for shorter time, אסור לקח שכר שבת ויום טוב. So then you're not allowed to take wages for the profits of Shabbat and Yom Tov. So what does that mean? The owner would not be able to do that, to take that those time slots, because they are forbidden. Okay, great. So that's the whole tour, top to bottom. So let's see what we got in the Bet Yosef. Okay, so it says here, "Devarim elu ketavam harosh." So he says these things were written by the Rosh, Sham over there. V'gam haran katav Sham. The Ran also writes there, b'shem barav metivot. In the name of the metivot, the tanur v'rechaim kesadeh damu. So he says oven and mill is like a field. So what does that mean? That just like a field, right? We do sharecropping. Here also we do. Ve'avi gam ken divrei Rabbeinu Hai. He also brought the words of this rabbi. V'siem ve'he'ela. So he concludes, "V'nir'eh shebechol kiyotze b'zeh hakol minhag hamedina." So he says it seems like that when it comes to these types of things, they go like according to the custom of the country that you live in. V'hen hen divrei harosh. That's what the Rosh says. Zav v'chen katav harav Magid. This rabbi also says. בשם המפרשים, the name of their commentaries, כתב שזה היה דעת הרמב"ם, and he writes that this was the opinion of the Rambam. Satam mikatav, because he wrote, right, undefined, דבר ששם ישראל בעליו קרוי עליו. So he says like this, the Rambam, that anything which is, known to belong to the Jew, ואין דרך רוב אנשי אותו מקום להזכירו. And usually people don't rent this out, sublet it, or litno or to give it in sharecropping. Asur lehaskiro legoy. So you're not allowed to sublet it to a goy. Velo parat merchatz. לפי שאין דין זה תלוי במהות הדברים. So he didn't leave out the bathhouse because this thing is not really dependent on the essence of what it is. It really depends on the custom of the place you live in. שדרכן להשכיר פורני. So he says because what they do is they, in a place where they do rent out ovens, to the goy, ויש שן דרכן, and in some places they don't. וכן במרחץ, same thing also applies to the bathhouse, אלא שדיברו חכמים בהווה. But the rabbis talked about the more common, scenario, לפי מנהג ארצם, according to the custom of their land. ופרשו דברי רבנו היא, so they explain the words of this rabbi, נראה דהיינו לומר, it seems that he's trying to say, שאם הזכירו שנה אחר שנה, that if he rents it out year after year, ומתפרסם הדבר, and this matter became publicized, because of this became publicized. So meaning what? It's been already like a long-standing tradition, so everybody knows about it now. שאין דרכו לזכור פועלים אלא להזכיר התנור. So it says the way over there in that place where they live, it's not the way to hire workers for this. Rather, what they do is they sublet the oven, right? הנה דין תנור זה כדין שדה. So then, if that's the case, the oven, it has the same rule as the field. And therefore it's allowed. ועל פי זה כתב הראש. So it says, according to this, says the Rosh, בכל גבולנו שנתברר, נתפרסם. So it says in our place, right, where it's been publicized, שמי שיש לו מרחץ, anybody who has a bathhouse, או תנור, or an oven, אינו שוכר פועלים, he's not hiring workers, אלא משכירו לאחר, rather what he does, as we said, right, he sublets it to somebody else, חזר להיות כשדה ושרת. So it turns out to be like the same as the field, and therefore it's allowed. אבל הגאון מערי אבוהב. But he says when it comes to Maria Avuhav, Piresh Divrei Rabbeinu Hai, he explains the words of this rabbi, Sheizkiru Leshanim Merubot, that he rented it out for many years. Klomar Leshalosh or Arba. What does that mean? 3 or 4 shanim. Shechivan Sheizkiru Lechol Chach Shanim. Since he rented it out for that many years, Dame Lemecher, it's considered to be like a sale already. Veit Lekala, so therefore people find out about this, it becomes publicized. Vetu Lekala Mechash Lemaita'ain. So therefore, we're not really concerned anymore that it's like, some kind of a suspicious behavior. When you Midvarab, so it says, seems from his words, Shaya Gores im Iskiro Leshanim Marbe, that his text was here saying like this: if he rented it out for many years, B'divrei Rabbeinu Yerucham B'chelek Yudbet. What about this rabbi? Hem kemo shepirashti. He says, like I explained. That's how he explains it. Okay, great. So let's move on. Says Mashkatu b'sifrei Rabbeinu. So he says that which we see found written in the words of the Tur, Ilkach mutar b'kablanut, that it's allowed if you do it with contracting. Tzarich le'agia be'havla'a b'makom kablanut. So he says really it should say there havla'a, which means that it's being like nullified into a larger quantity and into a larger sum instead of kablanut, which means contracting. You got to replace one for the other. Shechen he hu bepiskei arosh. That's what it says in the Piskei Arosh. V'divrei Rabbeinu Yerucham b'chelek Yudbet. Also, this rabbi, umiu efshar de'adarabba b'psakim tzarich le'agia b'kablanut. So he says, however, it's possible that on the contrary, right, we have to the psakim of the Rosh, we have to change the custom of the text and say kablanut, which means the contracting, b'makom havla instead of havla, which means nullification. So this is what it means to say that since it's not the way to hire workers in that place, ela maskiro le'acher, rather what he does is he sublets it to somebody, right? But davar yadua, right, for a certain sum, right, which is known, the shana or chodesh, whether it's for a year or for a month like that, en melacha nikret al shem Yisrael. So when you do it that way, the labor is not really connected to the Jew. It's not really identified with the Jew. Hilkach, therefore, he says, mutar le'askir goy b'davar yadua. So therefore, you are allowed to do this, right? Which is to hire the goy for a certain amount of money, lechodesh for a month, that he should take upon himself all the labor which is needed. So, and the Jew will take all the profit. The goy bedidekav tarach. Why? Because the goy is working for himself. Mishum achi shara medina. So he says, therefore, it's allowed, according to the law, v'gam mishum marita ayin leka. So he says also, there's no issue here of marit ayin, right? The suspicious behavior. Kevan she'ena melacha nikret al shem Yisrael. Why? Because this labor, right, which is being conducted there, is not really right connected to the Jew. It's not really identified with the Jew. Aval data gaon Maria Avuhav. But he says this rabbi, on the other hand, she'if shalom ken mishum. You can't really say this. Why? Even the ones who are allowing to do this, besocher, that when it comes to rental, right, the goy is renting, but davar yadua for a certain amount of money, לעשות מלאכת קרקעות, מלאכת קרקעות, to make there some kind of labor of the land. Hanamile besadeh. That's only talking about the field. Mishum she'af al pi shelo yaseh melacha b'Shabbat. So he says why? Because even though he won't do any labor on Shabbat, yashlim beyom acher. So what he'll do is he'll make it up some other day. Aval b'merchatz. But when it comes to a bathhouse or tanur or an oven, she'im lo asa melacha b'Shabbat. That if he didn't do any labor on Shabbat, hifsid Israel revach oto hayom. So what happens is that the Jew there loses the profit of that day. Nimtza Israel ne'ena mimlechet Shabbat. So it comes out that the Jew is benefiting from the labor of Shabbat, ve'asur, and therefore it's forbidden. Okay, great. Let's move on. Almost done with this one. Are you able to follow along with this, or is it too hard a little bit?
I'm following
You're
along.
good. Okay, you're good. That's good. Okay, very good. I'm pleasantly surprised. Okay, very good. Beautiful. Fantastic. Okay, so uh, the truth is that I have a post about this, that I posted several times. The question is like this, right? People have asked me this question. I've been asked this question several times. These guys over here, these Jews, they're businessmen, they like to open businesses. So they want to know if they can operate a business, by, giving the profits of Shabbat to a goy, which is pretty much the same thing that we're talking about here. So I answered them, I wrote that the rule is that, pretty much what we're talking about here, that what you have to do is, that the Jew is not going to get any profit from Shabbat. So basically, right, whatever happens on Shabbat is going to belong to the goy. You know, the Jew will not take a penny from there. Um, so in a case like that, we're all, and then the Jew will take profits of another day to compensate. So meaning what? Let's say, right, the goy will take profits of Shabbat, right, and the Jew will take profits of Sunday, to compensate for it. So this way, right, they'll work it out like that. So Bet Yosef, Shulchan Aruch allows this, so you can do it this way, you know. But as we see from here, right, it really depends on the situation. So what does that mean? If the business is really identified with the Jew, like so, then there can be suspicion. So it has to be something where, the business, it will be feasible to entertain that the business, is subletted to a goy. It would be feasible to entertain such a notion. So if that's the case, then it's okay. You can do it that way. So the Jew will take the profits of Shabbat, and that'll be his salary. Right? If he's a worker. If he's a partner, so then it's not a salary. It's a partnership. Either way, it can work either way. Whether he's a partner or a worker, what you do is, you give him all the profits of Shabbat. So Jew doesn't take nothing from Shabbat. So there are ways to do this, if a person really wants to do it. So let's say, you're working in Manhattan, and Manhattan is like, everybody works there, so it's not really readily identified with the Jews so much. There's a lot of people working there, and have businesses and so forth and so on. So therefore, if a person does a business like that, in Manhattan, a place where they don't know him there, right? Or even a place where they do know him, but it's feasible to entertain that he sublets it to a goy. So if that's the case, right, we do allow it. Things like this. So, you got to consult with a good rabbi, and if you want to set up like a partnership like this with a goy, it's very possible to do it. No problem. Okay, great. So let's move on here. ואף על פי שאפשר לדחות טעם זה, so it's even though you can deflect this, מכל מקום, nevertheless he says, הדעת נוטה שלא לגרוס בקבלנות. So he says that, it's more reasonable to say, feasible to say, that we shouldn't be using the word of contracting. כי איך ידע לנו סייע לראש חולק על רוב הפוסקים. So in order that we shouldn't have to say, right, that the Rosh is arguing with all the poskim, שאוסרים בזה, they forbid this, כמו שיכתוב בסימן שאחר זה, it's like I'm going to write the chapter afterwards, בסייעתא דשמיא, בדברי רבנו ירוחם יכריעו. So he says, therefore, the words of this rabbi are going to be, right, the accepted approach here. רבנו ירוחם. Okay, let's move on a little bit. ומה שכתב אבל אם היה משכירו לימים אסור. But as we said, right, if he's just renting it out, for days, so then it's going to be forbidden, right? Why? Because in a case like that, it's identified with the Jew, and the goy looks like a worker here. So it says if the proper text here would be havla'a, which means nullification, hachi perusho, it would be like explained like this: mutar leaskir hamerchatz. You're allowed to rent out the bathhouse or tanur or the oven lechodesh or leshana for a month or a year. The goy to goy the medina share kevan she'eno notel sachar Shabbat. So it's really allowed. Why is that? Because he's not taking any profits of Shabbat. Ela be'avla'a. He's only doing it by way of nullification. So what does that mean, nullification? He's taking like a weekly thing, and so Shabbat is getting nullified into the whole week. So we're also not concerned about suspicion. So it says, why is that? Because in this place, right, the custom is to rent it out to others, sublet it. But if he's renting out something which is known, for a day, asur medina litol sachar Shabbat. So then you're not allowed to take the wages of Shabbat, the profits of Shabbat, b'yom tov, and also yom tov. Lehetia directly. V'lamad ken mibraita de'asocher et hapoel. So he says he learns this from this braita, which is in Bava Metzia. פרק הזהב, בבא מציעא, נ"ח עמוד א', שכתב רבנו בסימן ש"ו. So he says that Rabbeinu wrote this in chapter 306, ואגר סינן בקבלנות, הכי פירושו. So if the text says kablanut, right, which means contracting, then it will be like this explained. Mutar liskor goy lechodesh. You're allowed to hire a goy for a month, or shana, or for a year, lasot melechet merchatz, to do the labor of the bath house, or tanur, or the oven. Aval im socharo bedavar yadua. But if he's renting it for a fixed amount, right? Lechol yom, every day, asur, it's forbidden. Dainu ha'u, so the asocher et poel. That's like the one it says in the Gemara there. Ach lashon maskiro lashon kashe. But it says, however, the language here, which is they rents it out, difficult. Difficult for this explanation. Deim ken havalele michtov, because if so, you should have written aval imayam sochro. But if he was renting it, so he says here it proves, right, that the text of the havla'ah, which means nullification, is better. Because according to that text, comes out good, right, when you say maskiro, which means he rents it out. Okay, so that's the whole bit Yosef here. Let's go to Shulchan Aruch. We got to bring it up. Okay. So it says here, "Lo yaskir adam merchat shelo lekuti," right? You shouldn't sublet your bathhouse to a goy. Mipnei shenikra al shemo. Why? Because it's called on your name, so people think that you're the one who's opening it on Shabbat and using it, right, and working it. Bekuti ze ose melacha bo b'Shabbat, and the kuti, right, the goy is just going to be doing the labor there. Nevertheless, it's going to be forbidden because they're going to suspect that he's working for you. The stam merchatz lav le'arisuta, because usually, right, in a general manner, a bathhouse is not made to be subletted. Avid, Avid. Ve'amre shekol harevach shel Yisrael. So they're going to say, oh, all the profit is going to the Jew. V'sachar takuti bechach. And he hired the goy to operate it. Bekach leyom, every day for a certain amount of money, wage. ונמצא akuti עושה מלאכה בשליחותו של ישראל. So it turns out that the goy is doing labor, right, as an agent of the Jew. They're going to suspect that that's the case. Aval sadeh mutar. But he says, you know what? When it comes to a field, though, it is allowed, right, to sublet it, right, do sharecropping. Sheken derech lekabel sadeh be'arisut, because that is the common way, of doing that. So therefore, it doesn't look suspicious. So what does that mean? The farm belongs to the Jew. He's going to sublet it to the goy and let him operate it. For right, and take a percentage. So how can he take the percentage? Because he's not taking specifically from Shabbat, the labor of Shabbat. Rather, what he's doing is, he's taking the whole week. And Shabbat is like nullified in there. So there, it's allowed. Okay, so he says, "V'afa pi she'od'im shehu shel Israel," and even though they know that it belongs to the Jew, right, omrim akuti lekacha b'arisut. They're gonna say, "Oh yeah, the goy probably sublet it, and he's operating it, on his right, he's managing it himself." Ulatzmo hu obed, and he's doing it for his own profits, right? He's like a contractor, But tanur dino kemerchatz. So he says, the oven is like the bathhouse. So what does that mean? We're stringent about that. That we have to be stringent with the oven, just like we are with the bathhouse. So we shouldn't sublet it to the goy. But when it comes to the mill, he says, it's like the field. That's according to Shulchan Aruch. That's how he paskins. So it says, even though the goy took it for 1/3 or 1/4 of the profit, and the Jew does, benefit from what the goy is doing on Shabbat. Shara, it's still allowed, he says the Rama, The kuti adata de nafshi avid. Because the kuti, right, the goy is doing it for himself. So therefore there's no prohibition. Okay, great. So that's Aleph. Okay, so maybe we can try one more. We got 5 minutes left. Let's see what we can do. That will be the whole chapter, by the way. So he says like this. Katuv b'tshuvat hageonim. It says in the Tshuvot and the Geonim, Nishal milfnei Rab Netronai, right? This rabbi was asked, Yisrael shekanan merchatz poni migoy. Let's say, right, you have a case where the Jew acquired, right, a bathhouse or a bakery from, oven, right, from a goy. V'iskiram legoy, and then he rented it to a goy. So he bought it and then he rented it to a goy. V'agoy oseh bahem melacha. And now the goy is doing labor there on Shabbat, right? Secharo mutar. So he says that the Jew can take profit from there. Olo. That's the question. Can he or not? They asked him. Ki yesh geonim osrim mipnei shenikret al shemo. So he says some geonim forbid that because it's called in the name of the Jew. V'yesh misha matir, and some are allowing to do this. Mishum dema shamru mipnei shenikret al shemo, because that which they said, right, that it's called on his name. Eno ela b'Yisrael shabana le'atzmo merchatz. That's only referring to where the Jew, right, to build him the bathhouse for himself, or puni, or an oven. V'yashav hu be'atzmo behem, and he sat there, right, to operate it. Ufamim sheyaskiru v'yishaer shemo alav. So at times, right, he will rent it out, but his name remains on it. אבל מי שלא ישב בה, אלא נקרא, ולא נקרא עליו שמו, but whoever did never, dwell there in that business, whatever, he didn't operate it, it's not called on his name, מעולם, ever, אלא מגוי, or rather he bought it from the goy, ולגוי הזכירו, and he rented it to a goy. למה נאסר, says, why should we forbid that? והשיב באופן Shamartem en secharo asur. So he answers this rabbi. So he says, in a manner which you described, it's not really forbidden. Even in a place where it's forbidden to rent out, sublet the bathhouse to the goy. If so it says, if he rented it out to him, his servant, he did something forbidden. So he shouldn't put in the hands of the goy secharo, the wages, the profits. Shekevar mutaro, that's allowed. B'zeh shelo nikra shemo alav meolam. That's only if his name was never associated with this business. Ve'en bo chashash marit ain. So therefore, there's no concern about suspicion. Kol ikar en anu ro'in bo isu. So therefore, we don't see any problem with that. He says. עד כאן יש לנו, that's the end of it. ומה שכתב שאפילו במקום שאסור להזכיר תזכיר, מזכיר. And now what you said, right, that in a place where it's forbidden to rent it out, even if he did rent it, secharo mutar, the wages are allowed, the profit. And can dat Rambam, the Rambam doesn't agree with that. Ve'amor l'chilso, kemo shechto b'siman reish mem hey, like we're going to explain this chapter later on, 245. Katvot Tosfot Besof Perek Kama de Avodah Zarah. Tosfot says over there in Avodah Zarah, Bezel Lashon Ram. That's what the Ram says. Haya noten tam de leachi mutar de arisut sadeh. So he says, the Ram, okay, I guess we're getting pressed for time over here. We're not going to finish this tonight. So Bezal Hashem, we'll continue next time. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Chazak u'baruch, Laila Tov, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God
Good
bless.
night.
All the
See you
best.
tomorrow.